commercial airliners, crashes into one of the towers. This was around 9 a.m. Eastern time this morning, about 5 hours ago. Another plane crashed into another tower. One of the towers began collapsing. The hope was that it would only be a partial collapse. It turned out to be a total collapse. Debris, including concrete and steel, raining down on a wide area around that building. And then incredibly, almost unbelievably, a short time later, the other tower began to creak and wobble and then collapse. Other buildings in the vicinity, as reported by Mayor Rudolph Giuliani in a live television report to CBS News a short while ago, also began to collapse. This was the scene just after the collapse of the buildings, New York City high school students being evacuated. Teachers and others counseling them, be careful as you flee. At the World Trade Centers, some people jumped, were forced out of windows at high up. 110 stories were those buildings. This was the scene. Horrified spectators cried aloud as they saw one after another persons jumping or forced out of the building. There were secondary, then third explosions, and then a fourth explosion. Apparently, no one knows for sure, from the high-octane fuel and other causes in the interior of the building brought about by the crash of the two planes into the World Trade Centers. 4 aircraft, commercial aircraft, were hijacked during the day. 2 of them crashed into the World Trade Center buildings. Another apparently crashed into the Pentagon, where there has been some loss of life. How much we do not know, and there have been some injuries. And then another plane is believed, this has never been completely, totally confirmed, in the area of Camp David, the presidential retreat in Camp David, Maryland. FBI officials reported earlier that a plane had crashed in that vicinity, but it's been a confused reporting situation about that since then. And then in western Pennsylvania, in the Pittsburgh area, there was a big plane crash there, details of which are still being sorted out. That was the crash in Somerset, Pennsylvania. So the North World Trade Center towers hit, then the South Tower hit, both collapsed. Plane crashed at the Pentagon, plane crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, and one may, I underscore the word, have crashed in the vicinity of Camp David, Maryland. This is perhaps the most audacious terrorist attack that's ever taken place in the world. The most audacious terrorist attack ever taken place in the world, according to Chris Yates, an aviation expert with Janes in London. And he said it takes a logistics operation from the terror group involved that is second to none. He went on to say that only a very small handful of terrorist groups is on that list, and he names at the top of the list Osama bin Laden. That's quote unquote for Mr. Yates. However, we keep emphasizing no one knows who's responsible for what happened today. And you may want to note that on previous occasions, first reports about who was responsible for what turned out to be erroneous. It will be many hours, perhaps days and weeks, before it can be sorted out who, in fact, is responsible for these actions today. John Roberts is at our Washington bureau. John?
Well, Dan, let's first of all speak to the issue of whether there was or there was not any kind of a crash in the Camp David area. I spoke with Secret Service sources just a few minutes ago, Dan, who say that they have no evidence that there was any kind of a crash or an explosion or fire or anything near Camp David in the Catoctin Mountains of Maryland. They say that there was this aircraft that went down in the Pittsburgh area, which is still some distance from Camp David, but there was nothing, at least, probably I would think within a number of miles radius of Camp David, and nothing to suggest that Camp David may have been specifically targeted either. However, they do not know at this point where that aircraft that crashed in Pittsburgh was headed, whether it was indeed headed to Pittsburgh, whether it might have been trying to overfly the northern area of Maryland near Camp David. Perhaps it might have been headed for downtown Washington, D.C. as well. because there, of course, is that other aircraft that crashed into the Pentagon. And there appeared to be, at least from my perspective, Dan, upon arrival at the White House this morning, that when that aircraft went into the Pentagon, what had been a fairly mild state of alarm at the White House suddenly went to an enormously high state of alert. They evacuated the building within 5 minutes, and they cordoned off a number of blocks around the White House, not letting anyone back in. And as well, they evacuated the vice president and his staff. He is in charge of the Situation Room right now, off campus, not at the White House, though by all accounts still in Washington, D.C. He is there with his national security advisor and his chief of staff at his side. Lynn Cheney, his wife, also said to be in the same area as the vice president. But Dan, a development within the last 45 minutes that I certainly don't want to begin to appear to speculate on, but we understand, Dan, that the congressional leadership this morning, after the attacks, was taken from Capitol Hill. They were taken to a secure location for a while under the protection of the Capitol Hill police, and then they dispersed and were operating out of private offices. Well, CBS News has learned from congressional sources just recently that the leadership of Congress, the congressional leadership, has been gathered together and is being ferried by helicopter individually, not together, individually, to a location outside of Washington, D.C. Now, of course, the big area that has been designated for Congress to go to in the event of a big national emergency, war, nuclear attack, is Weather Mountain in the western part of Virginia, Dan, but we can't say that that's where they've been taken. President Bush, after leaving Sarasota, Florida today, went to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, where he made his first statement after receiving a full debriefing of what had taken place in New York and Washington. Here's what the president had to say.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
Strong words this morning from President Bush, or this afternoon from President Bush at Barksdale Air Force Base, where Air Force One touched down after the president left Sarasota, Florida, where he'd been holding an education event earlier today. Those strong words backed up not too long ago by British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who said, "This barbarism will stand as their shame for all eternity," speaking of the people who perpetrated this act. He also went on to say, Prime Minister Blair of Britain, "This is not a battle between the United States and terrorism, but between the free world and terrorism," and that Britain will stand shoulder to shoulder with the United States. Now, shortly after President Bush made that statement, Air Force One took off from Barksdale Air Force Base destination unknown, but something curious and unusual happened just prior to Air Force One's departure. The normal, what's called tight pool that follows the president around, usually neighboring in the area between 13 and 14 people, was whittled down to 5 people. There were a number of people from the media who were left behind at Barksdale Air Force Base, which may be a suggestion that Air Force One is not headed back for Washington, because there would be no reason to leave those people if indeed it were headed back to Andrews Air Force Base, but that indeed Air Force One may be headed for another location. At this point, the president is being kept under tight wraps. No one is talking about his destination or his whereabouts, though we do understand that the vice president is still in Washington, D.C. But again, to reiterate, a change with the leadership of Congress. They have been gathered together and are being helicoptered, ferried individually out of Washington, D.C. to an undisclosed location. And again, as far as any explosion near Camp David, Dan, the Secret Service saying that they have no information about that. It doesn't appear to have happened. Dan?
Roberts, we know that Vice President Dick Cheney is in charge in the White House Situation Room with able assistance from Condoleezza Rice of the National Security Council. Do you know who is with President Bush? Who would be the expert, if you will, helping President Bush as he is in transit from Florida to Shreveport, Louisiana, and then to wherever else he's going?
Well, Dan, when the president left for this trip to Florida, it really was more of a political and an issues trip. So he took his top advisors. Karl Rove is with him. Karen Hughes is with him, as are many of his top political and issue advisors. General Powell was in South America. He is headed back to Washington. Condoleezza Rice stayed here. I do not know if Stephen Hadley, who is the Deputy National Security Advisor, might have been traveling with the president. But, Dan, as it was just a quick overnight to Florida, there's no reason for Mr. Hadley to be there. So it may be that the president does not have one of his senior national security staff with him. There's probably a minor staff member. But certainly, Dan, they are doing everything they possibly can to hustle out to the president all of the expertise that he would need. But certainly, Dan, his closest cadre of advisors have been with him since he left on Monday afternoon.
Our White House correspondent John Roberts in Washington. We go to Scott Pelley in downtown on the tip of Manhattan, where the Twin Towers collapsed. Scott?
Dan, I'm just a block from one of the World Trade Center buildings. There's another large building that's a short distance from where the aircraft impacted. It is burning above me now. There are flames shooting out of several stories of this building. Firefighters have told us there is some concern that the building might collapse because apparently the opposite face of the building has been blown away. There is towering black smoke, as you've seen from your live cameras, still rising over the tip of Manhattan. I just spoke a moment ago with some firefighters from the 3rd Aviation Battalion out of the Bronx. They told me they got here right after the first airplane impacted. They were getting their tools off their truck when the building began to collapse, and they described diving into a subway station and hearing all of the World Trade Center tower falling all around them. Apparently their tools are still buried under the rubble, and one of the firefighters said that if the subway station had not been right there, they would certainly all be dead. They also described from the center of this scene a New York City police lieutenant who was telling them to be careful to get back, and as he was waving his arms in the air, a piece of debris apparently fell from the World Trade Center building and severely wounded this officer who was trying to help the firefighters stay safe. Dan, I'm at the corner of West Broadway and Murray Street, and it is an unbelievable scene here. There are huge drips of paper. This is all the office paper that was so carefully filed in all the hundreds and hundreds of offices in the World Trade Center. It's now scattered everywhere, drifting around like snow. I've seen letters from law schools. I've seen Christmas cards, all kinds of correspondence.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kim Kerrigan here in the WBZ4 newsroom, where we continue to update you on how these horrific acts today are affecting us right here in the base. state. Let's update you on a couple of things. You'll remember, or you've heard, that this all began this morning really at Logan Airport, which, by the way, is still closed and will remain that way indefinitely. This morning, American Airlines Flight 11 left Logan Airport. It was bound for Los Angeles. There were 81 passengers on board, 2 pilots and 9 crew members. That plane crashed into the World Trade Center just after the 9 o'clock hour. United Airlines Flight 175, also destined for Los Angeles, 56 passengers on board, 2 pilots and 7 crew members. That flight